I think everyone's here.
That appears accurate. Which student is affirmative?
That is me, Melanie, College of Idaho.
Melanie, are you ready?
Yeah, has anyone made the speech drop?
No.
Okay, I can go ahead and make it.
Thank you.
Can't believe my round 6 was live stream.
Okay, I'm making the speech drop. I have to join on my laptop though and do it that way.
Is the negative debater here?
She just was.
Yeah, I see their icon. I just
She is here.
Yeah, I don't know that because they don't have their camera on. So.
Can you see me or hear me?
We can hear you. We can't see you.
Okay, let me see you. Can you see me now?
Nope.
I'm sorry, my camera and microphone have been glitching out this tournament for some reason. It's only on the 8x8 too. It's so weird.
No problem. I mean, if your camera has an issue, don't worry about it. I think we'll be all right. I just wanted to make sure you were here so
Okay.
we can begin.
Okay, well, I am ready whenever you are.
Okay. All right. Inherency. Current employment immigration backlogs gives other countries a significant advantage attracting highly trained workers. This is Candle in 20. Currently, 1 million foreign workers and their family members have been approved and are waiting to receive lawful permanent residence, LPR. Because this employment backlog is projected to double because foreign workers whom U.S. employers sponsor exceeds the annual statutory green card allocation. The ceiling inordinately has long waits for employment-based green cards. Many Indian nationals will wait decades. This backlog can impose significant hardship on these prospective immigrants. It can also disadvantage U.S. employers for attracting highly trained workers. The plan is the United States federal government should enact Senate Bill 386 with an amendment to increase employment-based LPRs, eliminating 3 statutory restrictions on legal immigration. The first is eliminating the per-country ceiling for EB1, EB2, and EB3 visas. The second is eliminating the 7% per-country ceiling for family-based preference category immigrants to replace by 15%. And then the final, remove annual immigration restrictions on long-term temporary visa holders to obtain permanent residency status. Solvency. Removing per-country ceiling solves 400-year backlogs and attracts additional skilled workers. This is Candle again. Indian nationals who enter the employment-based backlog have to wait an estimated 195 years for green cards in the EB1, EB2, and EB3 categories. This analysis estimates that holding current conditions constant, these wait times could increase to 436 years by 2030. The number of green cards for employment-based immigrants could be increased by altering the total worldwide limit. Such legislation would alleviate the current and future employment-based backlogs. The current limit was established 30 years ago when the U.S. economy was half its current size. The larger U.S. economy reinforces the need to find the best and brightest brides from overseas. Senate Bill 386 frees up H-1B visas, bond in 20. The bill also creates a new form of legal status. Those on long-term temporary visa will obtain a status comparable to the permanent residency with a green card, but without having to wait in line or be restricted by annual immigration limits. These workers will no longer be considered part of the numerically limited H-1B program permits, and it will undoubtedly attract significant more applicants from abroad. Removing restrictions on green cards allows informed STEM PhDs, spurring innovation and alleviating the current shortages caused by H-1B programs. FWD in 20, the H-1B program simply does not provide enough visas or prioritization to effectively retain international STEM graduates. There are only 85,000 H-1B visas available each year, a cap set by Congress and unchanged for a decade. Even if advanced degree holders were very lucky and were selected for every single H-1B visa in the lottery, it would still leave 10,000 U.S. educated graduates with no opportunity to get a visa and start contributing. The United States would benefit by expanding its legal immigration avenue so all international graduates, including advanced STEM degree holders with a job offer, have a chance to stay and contribute to the workforce and the U.S. economy. The most straightforward solution is to allow graduates with U.S. degree and a job offer to start working and begin the green card process immediately. So this would relieve pressure on the H-1B program and keep it more focused on truly temporary workers while facilitating permanent residency for well-educated and highly skilled individuals who have already lived in the U.S. for some time and can permanently fill these roles. We're going to go ahead and move on over to tech and tech innovation and a skilled workforce are crucial to America's post-COVID recovery, the ITIF in 20. As the COVID-19 pandemic sweeps across the world and the U.S., negatively impacting all industries, including the technology industry, with workforce downsizing and decreasing revenue, renewed attention must be given to the high-tech industry. As a source of economic hope with the potential to reignite the American economy through innovation and job creation, technology has become a critical driver of productivity and competitiveness for the entire economy. Members of Congress and other policymakers can find common cause in advancing an agenda that builds up these shared foundations of national strength and a globally integrated marketplace. These foundations include a highly educated and skilled workforce for which there must be high-skilled immigration. The data underscores how technological innovation shapes the entire U.S. economy. The trend in which technological innovation through IT and other means is transforming every sector of the economy must continue to do so for the country to build its competitive edge. We're going to go ahead and move on to the China AI advantage. Foreign talent is the backbone of the U.S. technological system. Raster in 19 found that to remain competitive, the United States needs a human capital strategy for technology. International talent remains a critical backbone of the country's technological ecosystem, and the U.S. has the influence to ensure responsible AI becomes a global norm. Raster in 19 again, the U.S. has unparalleled influence and authority on a global stage, and it is in a unique position to set an example for the world on how AI should be used, and will help to ensure a more responsible stewardship of AI to become the global norm. But America can no longer retain high-skilled Chinese nationals. Raster again, today the overall total number of Chinese graduates remaining after graduation is shrinking. To ensure the United States attracts the best AI talent in the world, Congress should reform the H-1B visa program, the H-1B visa application progress. Congress should work to reform the H-1B visa process to make it more suitable for hiring and retaining international talent. America's AI talent base will need to draw heavily on foreign nationals. Congress should provide sufficient opportunity for U.S. companies to recruit talent from abroad. China is going to develop AI by recruiting foreign high-skilled workers the U.S. turns away. So at Slew and Peterson in 2019, China's difficulties in attracting international talent hampers ambitions for tech leadership. Chinese leaders have identified workforce shortages as long-term obstacles to success. And we're going to go ahead and move down to China wants to put AI in charge of military decision-making. This is Allen in 2019. China's expectations for the future in battlegrounds will be there will be no people fighting, ever-increasing military use of AI. And beyond using AI for autonomous military robots, China is interested in AI capabilities for military command decision-making. AI systems will be just like the brain of the human body. AI completely changes the current command structure. AI in decision-making causes nuclear war. Robertson 19. Handing over control of nukes to AI is seen as necessary. AI would trigger an automated response even before the first nuclear detonation in a time frame much quicker than the human mind. Many policy believe that the ceding control of the nuclear arsenal is a tremendously bad idea that upends the entire doctrine of deterrence, which is what has averted a nuclear war today. The impact is an unimaginable loss of life and destruction. Thank you. And I open myself up for cross-examination.
Perfect. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sounds good. Sorry, I'm just going to keep making sure. I'm going to start my timer now. So can you please explain to me exactly how, I guess, your China advantage, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, can you explain that to me in brief?
Yeah, so My entire point is how we need to expand this program so that we are attracting more highly skilled foreign workers, because as of right now, most of them leave, like they graduate and then they leave the country. So we need to actually be ensuring that they stay and we get them into the tech industry, because the tech industry is is one of the critical drivers of the economy, which is necessary right now because we're recovering from the global pandemic. So yeah, it's going to help us maintain that competitive edge with China in the AI competition.
So can you explain how if we don't do this, it would cause nuclear war?
Well, as I said, they're going to be going over to China, working there. We've talked about how China's developing AI by recruiting foreign high-skilled workers that the U.S. turns away. That's directly from my Peterson card. So it's going to happen. They're already above us in this competition, anyways. So
as of right now, so you're saying like in the competition, China's winning currently?
Yeah, because they already want to put AI in charge of military decision making. They're already working to do that.
Then can you explain how your plan solves for the backlog?
So in my Vaughn card in 20, she specifically says that it's going to be making them go through this process faster.
Okay, and then can you kind of explain in brief your plan exactly? Because there's a couple parts to it.
Yeah, so there's 3 parts. We're going to be eliminating the per country ceiling for EB1, EB2, and EB3 visas, eliminating the 7% per country ceiling for family-based preference category immigrants to replace by 15%, and we're removing annual immigration restrictions on long-term temporary visa holders so that they can obtain a permanent status.
So are you removing the 7% ceiling or increasing it? Because it sounds like
we're replacing it with 15%.
So you're not removing it then, technically?
If you replace something, isn't that removing?
So basically it's a new cap, you're saying? You're replacing it with just a new cap, is that right?
In essence, if you want to take it that way, yeah.
Okay, so how would the 15% be such a drastic difference from the 7%?
Well, considering we only give out 15,000 visas right now, I'd say that's a pretty drastic. And any percentage of an increase is going to be drastic right now.
But wouldn't we need more immigrants high-skilled immigrants to meet the demand that you're saying we need to meet?
Well, this is a great place to start. Increasing it by 15%, that's a major change, especially because we haven't touched this. We haven't really touched this percentage since the U.S. economy has grown bigger. So this is a great place to start, and it's going to build the foundation for more bills like this to come in the future. Okay, and then that is time. I am not going to take any prep right now. I'm going to use it all in my speech, and then I am going to submit my speech drop right now. Once everyone has it up, just let me know when you are ready. Is everyone good? Taking the silence as okay, perfect. Just making sure. Awesome. And then I am going to start my speech. And then I'm just going to be going off case and then on case if I get to it. And I'm going to be starting in 3, 2, 1. Implement executive action. Interpretation. The executive branch can only implement immigration reform that has passed through Congress, HHS 18. Laws are implemented by the executive branch. The president, as head of the executive branch, holds the power to direct in the activities of federal agencies. Regulations are published by executive branch agencies to clarify their interpretation of a law and how to implement laws passed by Congress. Violation. The act does not implement a policy that they make a court ruling that, that isn't a law passed by Congress and signed by the president. Limits are interpreted best for limits. The act explodes the topic to include passing of all new legislation. Limiting the agent to the executive sets the limits on the topic that NEG can prepare for allowing a more prepared negative team. Predictability. Our interpretation is most predictable. The resolution is the only stable gauge of preparation for negative teams. We can't possibly predict the number of possible agents that they come up with. This destroys negative our grounds. Resolutional integrity. Our interpret is the best for the integrity of the resolution because it's grammatically interpretation of all the words in the resolution. There was a court resolution on the ballot and it was soundly rejected, meaning the absent interp is already behind on the standard. Voters see.
T is a voter for the reason articulated above in the NFLALD rules 1 and Z. Thesis: biopolitics refers to the techniques and discourses used by government agents over populations to produce and fear necessary to exert power over a given society. This manifests itself in biopower, which uses mechanisms of control over the body to produce individuals as docile bodies that can be controlled, disciplined, and eventually disposed of in the name of peace and social life. Catastrophe 17. Foucault's analysis of governmentality allows better understanding of the relationship between fear and modern power. Fear is actually what the government agent of the state reproduces over time to establish the control of a docile body through the preservation of life. The government uses fear to power the population and to wage war in the name of life necessity. Fear is what we must be produced to establish control through a series of governmentalized techniques. Among those forms of governing biopolitics can be characterized as a political technique of governmentality for controlling and governing citizens. The concept of biopower signifies the power of abstract force realized through practices associated with the body. The human life in its biological dimension. Biopower is exercised to recreate individuals as docile bodies, control the political governing abdomen. Also notes governmentality produces a better life in which the species as a simple body becomes what's at stake in a society's political strategies. Framework: disrupting the biopolitical apparatus requires the objector to take on the role of the specific intellectual to negotiate local sides of struggle within the institution itself, reshaping the conscience of individuals and promoting change in the real world. These are about to uncover how we as debaters are produced institutionally. Whitman 06. Disrupting the technology of biopolitics is a difficult task, but not an impossible one. Acting within the institutional boundaries is quite possible. Task of the specific individual is to respond to local contingent sites of struggle in the context of global. To uncover how we are produced institutionally, human beings can defend against some forms of power. As an educator, the importance of biopolitics and education is that the regulation of the social accounts for a lack of analytical critique. Pedology, empathy has been substituted for the analytical, producing morally tolerable student, right-thinking individuals has become a staple and transformative pedology. We need to regard them as initial steps. Social changes take place through a change of heart and altering of the affective conscience of the individual to create a compassionate culture. Link: the U.S. visa process subjects immigrants to the biopolitical apparatus in the forms of fingerprints and tracking. Rosenberg 13. When you apply for a status to visit the United States, the Department of State consular officer will require your fingerprints and photo. On arrival to the United States, biometrics will once again be collected so that the identity of the visa holder can be confirmed. You will also be asked to provide these data when leaving the country in order that the state can keep track of who is entering and leaving the country. Their main aim is to work towards a safer, more secure America, which is resilient against terrorism and other potential threats. The use of biometric data is a widespread phenomenon undermining the political judicial status, not only people who are influenced by it, but all citizens. The problem is the balance of power. Citizens become vulnerable and prone to manipulation when the states collect sensitive information about their health, behavior, etc. In fact, the impact is influence war. Biopower exercises fear to wage war and draw lines between the other as enemies and those we're saving. That outweighs in turn CF. Catastrophe 17. War in a modern society has now become the regime of exercising biopower, particularly the war on terrorism, as a form of rule aimed not only by controlling the population, but producing and reproducing all aspects of social life. In order to preserve life from the disasters and atrocities of war, liberal regimes have to conduct wars on war campaigns by deploying strategies that must target not only the lives of enemies, but also the lives of the population in need of preservation and protection. In this context, the current war on terror is no different from all the liberal wars being waged on behalf of life itself. They use the war on terror as a defensive vitality. The government exercises the use of governmentality technique in which the biopolitical force plays an integral role in the state strategies that make the war on terror possible. Terror is the name given to the wars threatened but liberal ways of life. The alternative is to resist sovereign power through the refusal to produce distinction. All political binaries are predicted upon the distinction between zo and bios. By refusal to draw lines, we can contest the sovereign ban through contention at the level of meaning and exception. Adkins 4. One potential form of resistance to sovereign power consists of a refusal to draw any lines between zo and bios, inside and outside, human and human. We are suggesting that it's only through a refusal to draw any lines at all, and indeed nothing else will do, that the sovereign power as a form of violence can be contested in a properly political power relation can be reinstated. We escape sovereign power and reinstate a form of power relation by contesting its assumption of the right to draw lines, that is, by contesting the sovereign ban. To move outside, if we need only contest its right to draw lines in particular places, but also resist to call the draw lines any lines of the sort sovereign power demands, strategies that address where lines are drawn are undoubtedly crucially important and often seen as the only possibility for resistance. Although they contest the violence of sovereign power as drawing at the line, they risk their own violent relation in demanding that the line be drawn differently. In both cases, the drawing of the line represents a foreclosure of possibility and a denial of the properly political power relation. The metaphysics of presence that sovereign power's founding and foundalicious drawing of a line preposes can be challenged, examining the relationship between time and politics. The possibility of resistance lies in taking time and making time for politics. Miscounting is a refusal of and resistance to the grammar of sovereign power's drawing of lines between which counts bios and which does not zo. It's a refusal to play sovereign power's language game and follow the rules of counting, a form of commutus that's non-conventional, non-statistic, non-sovereign, non-biopolitical. Therefore, we actually turn all of the advantages that the 1AC claims. We are doing all of the same things, basically, but at a moral level. We're allowing these people to come in and help our industry, our tech innovation, our economy, but also not forcing them to be subjected to this form of discrimination and this form of control of fear. We're allowing all of the same stuff to happen. And they read a card, I believe it is Razer 19, and it talks about how these America needs these high-skilled Chinese. We're allowing the Chinese people to come in. We're not discriminating between the good immigrants and the bad immigrants, but we're allowing them to come in and out as they please to help out our industry and help our economy. So that is why you will be voting for the negative today, because first off, they were just not topical. They're implementing a new, the 15% cap is a new thing, and they're not removing the 7% ceiling. They're just replacing it with something that hasn't existed before and that was not passed through Congress. Thank you so much. And then I am open for cross-ex.
All right, so my first question, how is your alt not crossing this line you talk about?
The line of boundaries, what are you saying?
You said that my plan was crossing a line, so how is yours not crossing that line?
Totally. So my alternative is basically saying that we shouldn't be determining who comes in and out of the country, because we're basically forcing them to be subjected to this form of biopower, which is a form of tracking and tracking fingerprints, all this stuff without their consent. And it directly links to your plan, because by allowing more people in, they're subjected to, especially the visas in particular, I talk about that in particular, they're subjected to the form of violence.
So how is this process of selective citizenship not giving into this racial hierarchy?
Of course, because right now they're able to, like you said in your thing, the 7% cap is totally discriminatory towards people of country. And we're saying like the 15 is not enough. That's still discriminatory.
So how do you propose that we raise that any further in the current status quo?
Well, like you're saying, we need to remove restrictions so we help these people, and you're just not removing it.
How are you helping these people if you're not removing any restrictions?
But that's what we are doing, though. We're saying the alternative is to remove all boundaries, which is exactly what we're doing.
Okay. And so you said that so you said that you were solving all of my impacts at a moral level. So how exactly are you solving for systemic abuse at a moral level?
Of course. So basically it does all the same things yours does, but it's moral because we're not forcing these people to be subjected to biopower.
Okay. And can you kind of very briefly explain your biopower point?
Yeah, totally. So basically biopower is when people come into the United States legally, they're forced to get IDs, fingerprints. It tracks their health when they come in and out of the country without these people's consent. It also creates a war of terror. You
say that my entire plan's not topical. How is yours topical?
It's not the negatives responsibility to be topical. It's the affirmatives.
Okay, and like, how exactly is my plan not topical? I establish a very clear actor. I establish how exactly this is going to be happening. So how is my plan not topical?
That's a great question. So in particular, you're removing the 7% ceiling. So you're taking that away, and then you're implementing a completely new thing that hasn't been passed through Congress yet. The 15%, or else you'd be replacing it, which is also not topical.
Well, isn't this a good place to start by starting off with the 15% in a bill?
Like I said,
we need to start somewhere.
It's discriminatory, and it's forcing these people to be subject to biopower.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go ahead and take some of my prep. Okay, I was not running my timer. How much have I used?
A little under
I don't
3
have a
minutes.
timer ready. Sorry.
I thought I had my timer, but it was not running.
Like a little under 3 minutes.
Okay. I have my stuff uploaded. These are just cards that I might be referring to in my speech. Okay. So I'm just going to be going through their K, and then we're going to go back over onto my case. Everybody good to start? All right. First off, I'd like to start off on their framework, and we need to be going off of net benefits, which is what their entire thing is based off of. So you're gonna just want to drop their framework for this because we need to be going off of net benefits, and that is something that their entire framework is not doing. And then secondly, their alt solvency is refusal. They're actually not solving anything. They're basically refusing to produce any distinctions throughout this entire K. They're saying that they're going to be doing this without actually saying how they're going to be getting there. They're not showing anything of how this is going to be happening. They're not showing that this is feasible. All they're saying is just that the app is not implementing a policy, so you shouldn't go with theirs. Let's prefer ours, but theirs really isn't doing anything either. At least in my plan, I have distinguished one bill that is in the Senate right now, and I've shown that it's something that it's a starting point, but they haven't distinguished anything. I've distinguished a bill, I've distinguished the actor, I have been very clear about what my plan is. Therefore, you're going to want to prefer app there. And then we're going to perm their all as a double bind as well. So if their alt can't overwhelm my plan, then how is it going to be overwhelming? How is it going to overwhelm their alt? This just simply does not make sense. So let's permeate that. And then a lot of their cards are talking about for their impacts on on their biopolitics. A lot of their impacts are talking about the war on terror. And I would just like to remind you that in my case, we talked about an impact of nuclear war. You're going to want to prefer that in today's round because as we all know, extinction is going to be outweighing this, and that is potentially what it could come to with China and their AI advantage. Their biopower, they're conflating this issue of biopower to be something a lot larger than it truly is. Besides all of these cards are on the war on terror. So why is this already not an issue? Why is this something that we are not dealing with right now? It simply just does not make any sense. If this really was something that is a big of an issue that they're contending it is, then we would be solving it right now. Logically speaking, we wouldn't just sit here and let this happen. So with that, just perm their all. It's not going to happen. They're saying that they're going to be they're turning all of my impacts in a moral way. But like I said, how are they going to be solving for systemic violence that people go through while they're detained? How are they solving for these impacts of getting people through this entire process faster? They're not solving anything. They're just saying that my plan isn't doing what isn't doing what I'm saying, but they have yet to actually prove actual solvency and topicality. And there's a big issue with topicality and their point of their biopolitics point. They haven't actually proven a strong link here to how they're going to be making this better. And even then, there's really no link of biopolitics to the resolution at hand, really. So with that, let's go back over onto my side. And one of the main reasons as to why you're going to want to prefer my side in today's debate is because I've shown you that it's a legitimate bill that is in Senate right now, and we need a starting place. They're going to try to tell you that this 15% is not good enough. But as I said, we all know that immigration policies have not been changing at all in the past 20 years. Like, they haven't been changing enough in the past 20 years. They haven't been keeping up with the U.S. economy alone. So we need to start somewhere, and this 15% is an excellent place, especially considering we are only in Biden's first 100 days. We need to be seeing something, and this is a great start. It's going to build a foundation for future bills to come. And so with that, we need to be extending that and extend the card where I talk about this plan. This is going to be Vaughn in 20. We need to be looking at the actual benefits from this. We're going to be seeing that people are going to be going through this process faster. They're going to have a status comparable to permanent residency with the green card without having to wait in line or be restricted by annual immigration limits. And I'd like to point you guys all over to my card that is about how long-term detention leads to permanent psychological impacts on women and children, and it creates a unique form of systemic violence. This is Shepard in 2017. Women and children in detention centers often suffer from psychological problems such as depression and anxiety related to trauma they experienced in countries from which they fled, which is often compounded by their treacherous journeys to the U.S. The effects of trauma can be exacerbated by detention. The loss of control over one's life and circumstances and the feeling of being trapped can remind detainees of past trauma and re-trigger feelings of victimization and shame. And this is very detrimental because the neg isn't taking these people and making their situations better in any way. As I said, if they're all can't even overwhelm my plan, then what is it going to be doing here? They're not going to be helping these people at all. And there's a very big issue as shown in my Ortega card. This is on the last document. Lack of legal status leads to overqualification and reduces wages. And it's leading to labor market exploitation. They very clearly highlight this in that card. That is a big issue, and they're not solving that at all. Meanwhile, we are, because we are getting these high-skilled foreign laborers over into the country, and they're going to be here permanently. And then finally, I would like to point you guys to my Bashi 2004 card. The relation of the hierarchy in the process of selective citizenship is characteristic of the immigration legislation premised around labor that is premised upon a general ambivalence that always views blackness and black bodies as disposable. They are not bettering this problem. In fact, they're just going to be spreading global anti-blackness. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to take my 4 minutes of prep time starting now. Okay, I'm all out of time. I'm submitting my speech drop right now. Okay, just let me know when everyone is ready. You good? Is my opponent good? Perfect. Then I will be starting. Oh, and then I'm just going to address topicality really briefly and then do, the rest of the time. I'm going to be starting in 3, 2, 1. So first off, I'd just like to start off saying that they did not provide a counter for my topicality argument or really respond properly, which means I win the tea debate. It's clear that they do not meet my interpretation. You'll be voting negative on your ballot. Their affirmative is hard linking to this position, meaning the 1AC is expanding the biopolitical apparatus to the sovereign. They've conceded that this uniquely constructs the techniques of control that are essential to how the states exercise biopower over populations. The affirmative draws a line between who is deemed worthy of living and performing. The affirmative draws the citizen. Your ballot is key to understand how this institutionalizes the immigrant into sovereign power. This technique of governmentality physically and discursively expands the sovereign's ability to track, identify, and organize populations into groups that can be disposed of in the name of peace. You can read this as an independent case, turn in a reason to reject the AF with or without the alternative. We'll be defending the refusal to draw lines. The AF might remove lines of statute and claim to solve the problem, but we won't defend any of the lines of statute that distinguish between who and who isn't a sovereign subject. This is a question of ontology and how our rhetoric choices shape reality. All of us in this room are already under the sovereign's influence, and as a judge, your responsibility is to operate within the system to help us all uncover how our roles in this educational setting expand the sovereign's influence on our speech acts. This is the pedagogy role of the critic, and that their framework response that do not interact with. You'll be enacting the role of a specific intellectual that Derrida says in this first step to resisting how we are disciplined into these roles. This means the AF is framed out of the round once we are controlled that the epistemology has tangible, real impacts on who lives and who dies in immigration policy. Their AF is a hypothetical implementation, and that's fine. They can weigh their AF, but the only all is doing the work to uncover the nefarious ways the state exercises power to dispose of the other and maintain our liberal order. Endless war means death to our enemies and a reason to reject the perm. The 1AC uniquely contributes to the state's war machine. The biometric regulations placed on permissible population, a starting point on how the state constructs who is friends and by proxy who is the enemy. This means that the 1AC is a starting point for biopower fueled wars exercised in the name of saving those who deem worthy. The war on terror is responsible for more deaths and destruction in the third world than COVID. The logic of the 1AC leads to trillions of dollars for drones and bombs in the name of peace and protecting the citizenry. But this is all temporary construction, as the war machine has been pointed out just as easily as once this deemed as the threat. This is the entire thesis of the 1AC. The 1AC has zero solvency for any of their hypothetically constructed happy worlds. Speaking of the permutation debate, they will be going for a permutation and the perm solvency double binds, hold them to a single perm, and the only legitimate permutation is do both. This skews my negative rebuttal and how I'm seeking to radically and pedology uncover our roles in the biopolitical apparatus. The AF has an extra speech, and one permutation of do both is a fair limit to place on the debate. It's reciprocal. I'm limited to one counter proposal. They should be limited to the single test of competitiveness. competitiveness. You can vote here when you look on your flow, and I'm undercovered on the illegitimate perms they go for. You'll have a protect on your flow as judge and specific intellectual. The alternative. We still have the links to the K and the F. We need to rethink the basis of politics way from the sovereign act of line drawing before attempting to legislate player life, beginning to the refusal to draw sovereign lines and a prerequisite to seeing alternatives in the present system. Atkins 05. Sovereign power produces bare life as a form of life under its ease way. Sovereign power, on the other hand, attempts to rule out the possibility of resistance to contest sovereign power as we need something different. The drawing of lines between forms of life is the way in which sovereign power produces bare life. The drawing of lines must be refused wherever the lines are drawn. Negotiating the precise location of the lines remains within the violence of the sovereign power. A refusal to draw any line between form of life takes away of the ground upon which sovereign power is constitutionalized. With life is produced as a bare life, it's not helpful for that life to demand its reinstatement as politically qualified life. To do so would be to validate the very drawing of lines upon which sovereign power depends and which produces life as the bare life in for the first place. It refuses to the distinction between bare life and politically qualified life. Practices this challenge or refusal of sovereign power are apparent in many locations, whether in hunger strikes or street demonstrations. Creative ways of provoking sovereign powers have been and are being found. The permutation debate. They say perm do both. First, you can extend Rosenberg-Bark 13 that articulates how the 1AC expands the biopolitical apparatus of the state. The link is a reason why the permutation does not function and the alt is competitive. Next, you can extend the thesis as an independent link to the 1AC. Our geology of biopower and immigration policy has a pedology function in the round. Only by identifying and uncovering the biopolitical techniques of the sovereign can we begin to resist that power over us. There's an internal link to any permutation and the reason you prefer the alt before the perm. You can cross-apply Whitman 6 from the framework that asserts why the resistance is key within the round and beyond. Next, any inclusion at the F is a relink to the K. The perm responds to the generalization failure of a law with the reassertion of sovereign authority. The perm is a stronger link by assuming the prioritization of biopolitical existence can occur without a simultaneous political existence. The alternative of refusal to draw lines is the only risk. You have to answer the ontological question of biopower in the world in the 1AC. You can cross-apply this adds to the alt or extensions of the state of emergency and the harms of the 1AC. This appeal is exactly how sovereign expands biopower, by appealing to as a political discourse and killing it in its name. This is independent reason to reject the perm in 1AC. Kolbeck 16. This is what evidence is in the state of exception, which exposes the operation of law precisely when law creates to operate. The state of exception is a revelation and indifference. Exposing sovereign power as what it is not yet or not always constituted within the network of relations, a state of exception and neither external or internal. This indistinction and indifference mark as almost complete annihilation and of the political loss of the political. Not only exposes the truth of politics as always harboring a logic of sovereignty, it also offers hope for the new conception of relation between life and politics. The properly political nature of life lies in the capacity not to be political. What might politics be if this life were not excluded and abandoned and not objective biopolitical management? I'm going to cut that card short, but you will be voting for the alt today because it's really in the K, because it's really the only way to do this morally. Thank you so much.
I'm going to go ahead and just use the rest of my prep. And I believe that was a minute 10.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
So you can.
Okay. So for this, I'm going to just be doing basically some straight voters as well as going over the entire K and T debate. So with that, everybody good? Perfect.
You're good.
All right. So first off, I just want to go over this entire K debate as a whole. So their entire critique right here is assuming things that my plan does not do. She talked about removing lines and stuff, but my plan is not doing that. My plan is actually about a very distinct Senate bill. I specified the actor, I specified what it's doing right now and how this is going to be impacting the American people. Sure, it might still be in the Senate, but it's a great starting place, and that is something we need, especially in the first 100 days of someone's presidency. And then finally, I do win the double bind perm. They like their entire K is just, it's illegitimate because they're straight up saying that they're doing all of these things without any distinction of how they're going to do them and what is going to be done. My double bind still does stand because if they're all can overwhelm my plan once again, then how is it going to overwhelm the all? And then finally, all they do solve is just the war on terror. I said all of these, almost all of their cards, if you were to go look right now, they're all on the war on terror. So if this truly is such a big issue, why hasn't it been solved? Why is this still a contention in today's debate? Their entire point of biopolitics is not as important as everything I bring up in my case. And I just really want to emphasize the fact that it's not a big point in today's debate, and it shouldn't be, because if it's really a problem, it should have been solved already. All of their cards on the war on terror. And then finally, I want to go over into my first voter, which is actually going to be, you're going to want to prefer nuclear war over biopower. So this is one of my biggest impacts, and they completely dropped it. This went unattacked along with some of my other points on China as well. So they talk about all of these impacts with the biopolitics, but why hasn't it been solved? They dropped a lot of my major impacts. China stealing workers from the U.S. economy getting better with foreign workers going to STEM, and us getting our technology sector back up to speed. They dropped all of these impacts here, and that is very important in today's round. And almost my entire China AI advantage it went unnoticed in this round. They didn't touch up upon it, and they didn't explain how they're going to be solving this, because this is very important. Where China's wanting to put AI in charge of military decision making, and we need to really look at the facts here. Would we rather have extinction or the impacts of biopolitics? This is something that's going to be a major voting issue. And then second, solvency. They did not respond to my point on how selective immigration creates racial hierarchy and how they're basically giving into global anti-blackness. They did not mention this at all, and this is a major point of contention, because I'm showing you that we are solving this racial hierarchy because we're getting rid of the process of selective citizenship. Well, we're making it better, and this is a place to start. Sure, this bill may be still in the Senate, but we need somewhere to start, and this is a great place, because they didn't distinguish anything in their plan, yet I did with my Senate bill. And so you're gonna want to weigh this over that, especially the point on how these people are going through systemic violence. They do not solve anything that immigrants go through. Thank you.
So I think we're ready to disclose. I say we just like one by one, just like say like really quickly who we like voted for, just like after an egg, and then so they'll know like who won or lost. Then we could go back and give the decision.
Sure.
I voted neg.
As did I.
As did I.
Okay, so the decision is a 3-0 for the negative. I can go first really quickly. So yeah, I think this is fairly typical for this division in that there's not a ton of clash in the debate for me to sort of like resolve. It's kind of like, I don't want to call it two ships passing in the night, but like there's sort of like in the NC and the AR, this like presentation of arguments, and then in the NR and the 2AR, you're both kind of like picking what you want to talk about. In the case of like the negative, you just have this like really long pre-written block that you're just like reading, and like there's embedded clash with the AR just because you're kind of like with this long pre-written block predicting like what the AF is going to say. So in certain places there's clash in terms of like the NR answering the AR in that way, but like a lot of it's not answered or like really dealt with in the specific terms that the AF argues it, and it's certainly not in order of like any kind of like flow that's recognizable because it's just like a long block that has been pre-written beforehand. And the 2AR is like, oh, but there's all these 2AR arguments, or these AR arguments, but doesn't like deal with the block. So I would say like first of all, like it's just hard to resolve the debate because there's not a lot of interaction happening in the round. The reason I vote negative is because I think that the negative has won a couple of like fundamental thesis claims. The first is that subjecting people who want visas to biometrics sort of like interpolates them into biopolitics in the process of determining like who is good and bad, permissible and not, et cetera, which is sort of like the logic that leads to, I guess, like nuclear wars in the war on terror. I think like the connection between like the link and internal link is like pretty bad, honestly. Just because like, yeah, I obviously agree like biometrics are biopolitical, but like I don't know how like biometric screening of immigrants is like a component of like the war on terror, or at least not in the context of like it leading to like war abroad with like Afghanistan, etc. There's not a ton of like interaction there, and there's at least like some attempt. And I mean, the link card does say terrorism, so like it's not like totally unfounded. I also think that like the negative is one that the alternative probably solves the case by refusing to make a determination about who is and is not a citizen, sort of like being the best sort of like starting point for resistance, and that inclusion of the plan sort of trades off with that approach. Is that me? I'm sorry. Sounded like there's okay, whatever. So yeah, and so like I don't buy the permutation. I think there's a link, and I don't think that there's an explanation about how you outweigh the negative. So I didn't find much of the 2AR to be very persuasive. Yeah, I guess like the last thing I'll say is like I think it would just be like a better debate, and also like you would probably improve, both of you would improve a lot more if you just like relied less on like coach help and more on just like figuring out things that you can like actually grasp in the round and argue. Like I don't know what it like is going to do for you to just like read a K and then read like an NR block that's written in advance. Like I just don't personally think it's going to help you get to the next division, which is like hopefully your goal. And like this isn't really like a part of my decision. But I don't know. There's like a lot of voices and backgrounds of like some of these videos. So I'm not going to accuse anybody of any like in-round coach prep, but like really make sure that like if there's other people that are in the room with you, that they're not talking during your prep time, or that you're not talking to them during your prep time, because that also I think is not going to be helpful for you moving forward. because like that's, I mean, obviously if like you're not doing the debating, then what does that really do to help you? So yeah, that's my decision.
Lewis, did you want to go next, or did you want me to?
Oh, you can go. That's fine.
Yeah, so I think just touching off a couple of the points Chad made, the clash was there, but certainly not to the level that it should have been. I think particularly one area that should have been debated more is sort of the interpretation of what the resolution is asking, particularly in that debate versus reform versus replace. The way my ballot went was in regard to topicality, and that the argument the neg made was okay against, I guess, but really where I voted was that the AF didn't do a we meet or answer well enough in order to sort of overcome or address the arguments the negation was making. Likewise, for the affirmative, if you are given a choice between plan or perm, you kind of have to choose one or the other. You can't run both. I think in this case, if you ran it the perm, you probably would have won my ballot in that respect. Only other things I would say, because Chad really did a thorough summation here. When establishing link chains, and this is something for AF and neg, make sure you clearly understand what your impacts are and how they link to your case and how it's going to sort of change or shape or mold the way in which we're thinking going forward. This is one area in particular that I would have liked to see more clash, but it wasn't there. And I think that really just comes with practice, and it comes with, taking the time to sort of run through your case and really thoroughly understand what it is in fact asking. One example of this would be like the negation. Your biopolitics K is actually good, but the issue is it needs to be better presented, in that when you are presenting what biopolitics is, I think it behooves you to have a card that gives a clear, concise, just, sweet definition, like biopolitics is this, therefore it is accepted because of this. Because I feel like a lot of the time that was spent in the negative construction rebuttal was spending an exhaustive amount of time simply explaining what biopolitics is. So, kind of do yourself a favor in this respect and find a card that does that work for you. For the affirmative, the artificial intelligence argument, I think, is the strongest argument your case has. What I would do, though, is really clearly articulate what the world looks like if we sort of ignore China's role in vastly developing this particular industry aspect, right? Because if we are focusing more on things like immigration reform or whatever at the expense of China's growth, that's not only bad for the United States and people want to immigrate here, that's bad for the world. So sort of my overall take in this debate was that, clearly articulate what your case is doing, and really what that boils down to is establishing a clear link chain. That's just kind of what I saw. And then, of course, touching on what Chad mentioned as well, is that the level of clash, has to deviate from the case someone actually interact with one another. So those are my notes. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have much to add or expand upon. I agree with, I'll echo the sentiment that there needs to be more clash in this debate. And I think that has a lot to do with, like, maybe sometimes debaters read positions that they're not super familiar with and they end up reading off blocks. And I think that a lot of the K debate that happens in the negative side is not really extrapolating the AF to the link of the criticism, more just reading these blocks that are like, here's what biopolitics is, here's what our alternative is. And in this case, you kind of get lucky and win this debate because the affirmative, and as you continue to debate more, you'll get more familiar with these critical positions you'll be able to answer. In this case, it's just simply a link argument that says, because when they apply for a visa, the government will fingerprint them and then track them, that's a form of biopolitical control. And because of that, we should reject it because biopolitics is bad. I think that you can make an argument on the affirmative here twofold. One, that biopolitics itself is more than just that. So if the link to the affirmative is that you fingerprint and track people, the permutation that does the alternative, which would remove that but still issues the visa, would seem to solve the larger part of the problem. So I think that that's like a shielding argument that you can make, that the alternative itself, since the link is so low, that level of link shouldn't really matter in the world of, because the permutation would shield what the larger problems is. Now, their alternative, which, says we shouldn't draw the lines of who a citizen is, maybe that's more, but that's not expressed the way it is to the visa system, which is much as the fingerprinting and the tracking. So I think you can gain a lot of traction there by just questioning what the link is, or how substantial the link is to what their impact is. Kind of when you're saying, hey, their impact's the war on terror, but how do they really get there? now Chad's correct. The link card does say it, but I think the smarter argument that you want to make is just that, like, look, the link isn't that large. Like the idea that just fingerprinting and tracking is what would, if we stop that, we'd stop biopolitical control. That seems kind of ridiculous. And so I would really minimize, what the plan does or how the negative articulates what the link is. And then, you would have judges that would be like, look, that's what makes the permutation so viable is the fact that the link to the plan isn't that big. And I think that is the way to start. And, and I just think that I'm empathizing a lot with you because it's a block that's being read and you're not familiar with that. I think if you would have had the same block and read it back, then as Chad's saying, that's kind of like the two ships in the night that was going to happening. And I would encourage everyone not just to read off blocks, especially in this division, if you want to jump up to the next division. The other thing I'll say is, like, I thought the topicality debate was really weird because the way I understood the T position was it has to be a congressional act, that it can't be the executive. And the plan seems to be an act of Congress. I mean, it enacts a piece of legislation. So I was like pretty out there on that. So if I was wrong about it, I apologize. But I don't really think it was a viable T argument against this particular act. But that's pretty much what I got to say.
Thank you so much for all the feedback. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for judging.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
You all have a great Saturday.
Thank you.
Good job, Melanie, again.
Oh, thank you. You too.